Why do people have bad dreams? Can we treat them? Can we make them happen on purpose? Today, we're talking about the science behind nightmares. Stay tuned. Hey everybody, welcome back to Sci vs. Sci. Today, we are talking about nightmares. Now, nightmares are what psychologists call a parasomnia, from para, or around, somnia, sleep. Psychological phenomena that happen around sleep. Nightmares, as you probably guessed, involve waking from sleep, usually REM sleep, with disturbing thoughts. Now, typically these thoughts cause an experience of fear, but they can induce other emotions like disgust or anger. Psychologists distinguish between idiopathic nightmares, that is, those without a known cause, and post-traumatic nightmares that are usually associated with post-traumatic stress disorder from some specific event. Night terrors are another parasomnia, which is like a nightmare, but it usually happens in non-REM sleep and usually doesn't have any kind of vivid dream involved. So this video is specifically about idiopathic nightmares that can strike anyone at any time. Scary. Now you're probably wondering, how often do we have nightmares? Well, because it's hard to catch someone having a nightmare, much of what we know about nightmares comes from epidemiological studies where they track health and wellness information in large groups of people. As many as 1 in 17 people report having nightmares at least once a week, with higher nightmares in women than in men. Frequency of nightmares tends to be similar among sets of twins, suggesting a genetic component. Now, nightmares are more common in people with anxiety, schizophrenia, sleep disturbances, emotional distress, and other symptoms that might be labeled pathological. In one study, they had college students keep dream logs every night for a full month. They found an average of 2.45 bad dreams during that month, and almost half of the participants had at least one nightmare so bad it woke them up in the middle of the night. So these things happen quite frequently in general, and some people have them a lot. But why do we have them? Could they serve some sort of useful purpose? Well, there are many explanations of why we have nightmares, or dreams in general for that matter. One of the most popular explanations for nightmares is that they help us regulate our emotions, especially fear emotions. Or some say they are a byproduct that happens when we're having trouble regulating our fear emotions. It's not totally clear. Now, Freudian explanations often suggest that nightmares are an expression of repressed anxiety or other unresolved conflicts in your life, especially from childhood. A more cognitive model suggests that your brain creates the imagery in the nightmare to match the context of the emotions you may be feeling. For example, if you're experiencing fear in your life, your dream may find ways to make that feeling of fear make sense, even though the real source of the fear is something else. This is called contextualization imagery, since the dream imagery gives you a context for understanding why you feel the emotion, even if it isn't the real cause. I tend to be partial to explanations that come from evolutionary psychologists who suggest nightmares could serve as an important survival function by simulating potential threats. If you can simulate threats before they happen, you can practice different ways of dealing with those threats to test which strategies might be best to help you escape. When you're asleep, you can take all kinds of actions in the dream without risk to yourself in the real world. That way, you can determine whether it's best to run from the bear or try to fight it. There is some evidence supporting this idea. For example, for kids, a common theme is being chased or attacked by monsters. Now, predator avoidance was a serious problem for our ancestors, and you don't want the actual interaction with the predator to be your first rodeo. Every dream gives you another rodeo to practice. Uh-oh. Am I going to dream I'm in the rodeo? A study of the content of the dreams of college students showed that most of their dreams were things that could actually happen to them and that are severe and cause them to engage in defensive behaviors, which makes sense from this threat simulation point of view. Another explanation for nightmares is related to the physiology of REM sleep. Naturally, when you transition to REM sleep, you get a surge of physiological arousal. Now, your brain, in trying to make sense of these surges of arousal, creates a dream to help understand why those things are happening, which helps you regulate and keep the arousal in check. Now, when your dreams can't keep up with the arousal that's happening, you start to experience the emotions like a bad trip, and the dream turns into a nightmare. Now, those are some explanations why we have nightmares, but I want to know, can we cause nightmares like Dr. Jonathan Crane, aka Scarecrow from Batman? Settle down. Somehow, no matter what we do, our channel keeps circling back to the Caped Crusader and his rogues gallery of adversaries. Scarecrow is able to use a drug to induce fears and phobias in people. So, how realistic is this? Well, in humans, a lot of different neurotransmitter systems are involved in sleep-wake cycles, and thus can influence dreaming in a variety of ways, including nightmares. Now, I'll suggest this is an area that needs more study, so take everything I say here with a grain of salt, but I'll mention a couple of pharmacological agents that have been associated with nightmares. Acetylcholine has an important role in inducing REM sleep, and cholinergic agonist drugs like donepezil are suspected to be associated with disordered dreaming. Beta blockers, which are commonly prescribed for high blood pressure, affect the norepinephrine system, and they are responsible for a third of all clinical trials listing nightmares as an adverse effect. Drugs like propranolol and atenolol. The common antidepressant fluoxetine, also known as Prozac, works on the serotonin system and has a probable link with increased nightmares, as do some stimulant drugs, including the drug bupropion, which is commonly used as an antidepressant and for treatments of things like ADHD, among other things. But rather than irresponsibly list every drug that might be associated with nightmares, I'll let you find that list in one of the papers linked in the description and instead say none of these reliably and instantly produce a nightmare. We don't have a drug for that. Yet. Aside from drugs, maybe there are other ways to induce nightmares? Well, one thing we know about dreams is that they can be influenced by the things going on in your life while you're awake, right before you go to sleep, or even things that are happening around you while you sleep. And this is why watching a scary movie before bed might result in you waking up in a cold sweat. But remember I mentioned also that many nightmares are associated with trauma of some kind. Because this is important to study, an animal model using rats has been developed. In this procedure, rats are placed in a special box where they receive a training session where they get foot shocks every now and then. Then, a couple of weeks later, they're placed back in the box to evoke the trauma memory. When they fall asleep, these rats tend to randomly startle awake, much like you would see in a nightmare in humans. Now, this also occurs for rats that didn't directly experience the shocks, but watched other rats experiencing the shocks through a little window. This kind of study allows us to understand the brain areas and neurotransmitter systems involved in nightmares so we can develop treatments in the future. Treatments? How do we treat nightmares? Well, there are a number of treatments for nightmares. Surprisingly, there are very few drugs that have been used to treat nightmares. A few have been tried, but it's hard to find a well-designed randomized control trial with a decent sample size, and so for this reason I'm hesitant to even mention any of the tested drugs here. But the good news is there are some pretty effective psychotherapies that can be used to reduce the impact of nightmares. One treatment, called imagery rehearsal therapy, or IRT, is useful for recurring dreams. Basically, a clinician will help you review the imagery in the dream, re-script the things that happen in the dream so it's not so bad, and then rehearse the revised dream while you're awake and relaxed. This way, when you go to sleep, instead of being the usual nightmare, the dream follows the new script and is less disruptive. But what about random dreams that aren't recurring, so you don't have a script to rewrite? Well, a recent paper reviewed the possibility of lucid dream training, where people are given practice at lucid dreaming to treat nightmares. Now, lucid dreams, if you're not familiar, are when you can become aware that you're experiencing a dream and you can start to gain control of aspects of the dream. This way, if you can tell this nightmare is just a dream, you can start flying around and shooting lasers out of your eyes and stuff, and it turns a scary time into a badass hero experience. That's the idea, anyway. So that's an overview of nightmares. I wonder if hitting the like button protects against nightmares. I mean, might as well try, right? Subscribe to get more videos on Batman villains, because apparently that's our lane now, along with all other things psychology. And until next time, keep thinking. Oh no, this is my first rodeo. Oh wait, is this a dream? I got this.